On 25th of June 1950, the Korean War started. It was a war between communist North Korea and democratic South Korea. The war ended around 3 years later without a winner, and the Korean peninsula is split in half ever since. But what if the North Korea won and united the country under the communist regime? Our story begins in 1910, when Japan annexed Korea. They controlled it till the end of the Second World War. On 24th of August 1945, Soviet troops entered Pyongyang, today's capital of North Korea. As a result of the destruction caused to the Soviet Union during the Second World War, Soviets lacked the resources to create a full satellite state in Korea, and Koreans enjoyed a higher level of autonomy than Soviet-controlled Eastern European states. American government feared that a power vacuum was being created in the region, and on 7th of September 1945, General Douglas MacArthur announced U.S. military control over Korea south of the 38th parallel and established English as the official language during military control. In December 1945, at the Moscow Conference, the Allies agreed that the Soviet Union, the United States, the Republic of China, and the United Kingdom would take part in a trusteeship over Korea for up to 5 years in the lead-up to independence. Koreans opposed this and wanted to be independent right away. In 1946, the Soviet Union proposed Liu Woon-hyung as the leader of a unified Korea, but this was rejected by the United States. Meanwhile, the division between the two zones deepened. The difference in policy between the occupying powers led to a polarization of politics and a transfer of population between North and South. In May 1946, it was made illegal to cross the 38th parallel without a permit. At the final meeting of the Joint Commission, in September 1947, Soviet delegate Terentij Shtikov proposed that both Soviet and American troops withdraw and give the Korean people the opportunity to form their own government. This was, once again, rejected by the United States. From 1948 until the start of the Civil War on 25th of June 1950, the armed forces of each side engaged in a series of bloody conflicts along the border. In 1950, these conflicts escalated dramatically when North Korean forces invaded South Korea, triggering the Korean War. The United Nations intervened to protect the South, sending a U.S.-led force. As it occupied the South, North Korea attempted to unify the peninsula under its regime. While UN intervention was to restore the border at the 38th parallel, Syngman Rhee, president of South Korea, argued that the attack of the North had obliterated the boundary. Similarly, UN commander General Douglas MacArthur stated that he intended to unify Korea, not just drive the North Korean forces back behind the border. As the North Korean forces were driven from the south, South Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel on the 1st of October, and American and other UN forces followed a week later. All of this was despite the warnings from the People's Republic of China that it would intervene if American troops crossed the parallel. As it occupied the North, South Korea attempted to unify the country under its regime. As U.S.-led forces pushed into the North, China unleashed a counterattack which drove them back into the South. In 1951, the front line stabilized near the 38th parallel, and both sides began to consider an armistice. Syngman Rhee, however, demanded the war continue until Korea was unified under his leadership. The communist side supported an armistice line being based on the 38th parallel, but the United Nations supported a line based on the territory held by each side, which was militarily defensible. The Chinese and North Koreans eventually agreed to a border on the military line of contact rather than the 38th parallel. The Korean armistice was signed after 3 years of war. The two sides agreed to create a 4-kilometer-wide buffer zone between the states, known as the Korean Demilitarized Zone, shortened DMZ. North and South have remained in a state of conflict, with the opposing regimes both claiming to be the legitimate government of the whole peninsula. Today, North Korea is one of the poorest countries in the world, while South Korea is one of the richest. In an alternate universe, the whole peninsula would be united under the communist regime, and a lot of things would be different. In 1945, the peninsula had a population of around 18 million people, 9 in the north and 9 in the south. Today, North Korea has a population of 27 million, while the South Korea has a population of 51 million people. If the Korean peninsula was united under the communist regime, around 24 million people wouldn't have been born. Today, North Korea has a GDP of around $48 billion, which is around $1,850 per capita, while South Korea has a GDP of around $1.8 trillion, which is around $35,000 per capita. Because the two countries were similar when they were divided in 1945, we can estimate that if they were then united under communist rule, the GDP of Peninsula would be around $96 billion, which is around $1,777 per capita. Today, North Korea has 1.8 million soldiers, 1.2 active and 600,000 reserves, 4,000 tanks, 70 submarines, and around 50 nukes, while South Korea has 3.6 million soldiers, 500,000 active and 3.1 million reserves, 3,000 tanks, 20 submarines, and it does not have nuclear arsenal. If the country was united in 1950s, there would be no point in having this much military. So we can estimate that they would have around 100,000 active soldiers and 2 million reserves, 2,000 tanks, 50 submarines, and they probably wouldn't have nuclear warheads. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to support me more and help me make bigger projects, you can donate on Patreon. I will leave the link in the description. See you next week.